All right, good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing today?
Doing good.
Good.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us on this evening. We are excited for you to hear our guest speaker on today. She's a phenomenal woman and someone who I highly and truly admire, especially her work within higher education and the field that that I am currently in.
Doing good.
Hold on one second, we have some feedback. Okay, so I'm going to ask our Freshman Innovation Council Chair for Cohort 3, Naomi, to come forward and just bring you some greetings and also to introduce our keynote speaker on tonight. And then she's going to turn the floor over.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone has had a blessed day. I am Naomi Ogamakin, your Freshman Innovation Council Chair for the 2020-2021 school year. It is my honor to present to you Ms. Barbara C. Morrell. Barbara C. Morrell, a native of Greenwood, Mississippi, is the daughter of Mr. Tommy and Ms. Nevada Curry. After the death of her father, she was blessed with a stepfather, Mr. Brian McKinley Green, and brother, Andre Jermaine Green. She was the valedictorian of her graduating class at board school and high school in Greenwood, Mississippi. After high school, she matriculated at Tennessee Agriculture and Industrial State College, now Tennessee State University in Nashville, earning the Bachelor in Science degree in biology in 1960. She was elected Miss Tennessee State University, 1959-1960. She received the Master of Science degree in Education Guidance in 1963 and is a graduate of the Institute of Educational Management at Harvard University. Morrell's stellar career as an educator and administrator spans more than 40 years. She is dedicated to her career to serving and educating students. Her career began at Tennessee State University in 1965 as the Director of Student Activities, where she actively counseled student government officials and provided leadership for the development of student support systems. In 1975, she was named Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs. In 1981, Ms. Morrell was appointed Vice President for Student Affairs and became the first female Vice President at Tennessee State University in the Board of Regent Systems. Having spent more than 22 years as an administrator, Morrell transitioned to the classroom in 1987 as an assistant professor of psychology at the College of Education at Tennessee State University, a position in which she held until retirement in 1997. She was selected Teacher of the Year in 1993. Morrell continued in her lifelong professional career at Tennessee State University as president of the Ventures Club 40 plus year graduates of Tennessee State University. Upon retiring from Tennessee State University in 1997, Morrell began a second career at Fisk University in 1997 as the Associate Dean of Students and Business Manager at the Jubilee Singers. While at Fisk, she also served as an instructor and advocate in the Teacher Education Department from 1997 to 2000. In 2006, she was named Dean of Students. Upon her retirement in 2009, she received the Fisk Board of Trustees Award for Outstanding Service to Students. Ms. Morrell was founder of the Real Sports Leadership Academy, an organization designed to assist high school athletes in their transition to college. Many students benefited from the summer program and attended colleges such as LSU, University of Wisconsin, UT, Illinois State, and some of those students became college coaches at schools such as Illinois State. In addition to her outstanding, rewarding, and exciting career as an educator, Morrell has been bestowed numerous honors, awards, and achievements, such as the first female appointed as vice president of a university in the Tennessee State Board of Regents System, 1981, selected among top 10 professional women in Nashville, 1984, Leadership Nashville Award, 1985, Distinguished Alumni Award, the National Association for Equal Opportunity in Higher Education, 1986, selected member, Master Plan Task Force of Tennessee on the Future of Education in Tennessee, commissioned by the Tennessee Higher Retirement for outstanding service to Tennessee State University in the Division of Student Affairs by administrators, faculty, staff, students, alumni, and community. 1987, Teacher of the Year, Tennessee State University, 1993, organized by the Metropolitan Nashville City Council for services to youth as Executive Director of Real Sports Leadership Academy, Incorporated, and TSU Homecoming Co-Grad Marshal, 2011. Morrell is a member of the Ventures Club plus 40 years graduates of Tennessee State University and currently serves as the president of the Ventures Club. Morrell was wife to Robert M. Morrell, deceased, former Dean of Men and Director of Housing at Tennessee State University. She supports the Robert M. Morrell Arboretum Contest, which is the traditional opening event for Tennessee State University homecoming. She has one son, Clyde P. Morrell, Sr., Trudy, and grandson, Clyde P. Morrell, Jr. Please join me in welcoming Miss Barbara C. Morrell.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I would just love to see all of you in person. But since that's not possible, we will be able to see each other on Zoom. And I guess you thought that that was going on forever in terms of over the years and what I've been involved in. And it did sound like that. And I guess your resume would be even larger when you come from Tennessee State and go out into the world. So mine is so long because next week I'll be 83 years old. So I'm looking forward to a great birthday and a chance to spend tonight with you and to tell you some of the experiences that I had along the way. And hope that my sharing with you some of the things that happened with student governments over the years will encourage you and help you get a chance to really experience wonderful times in your Student Government Association activities. If you want to go on to the next, start the screen, I'll be ready to get started. Now, you know, I'm from the old teacher style, so I'll have some questions that I need to ask you at the end of this session. Generally, I used to do that to make sure people were listening, right? But I don't have to do that with you all because I know you are listening. But I will point to someone on the screen and said, you know, I have two questions and I want to make sure that you answer those. So the two questions are very simple. I'd like to know, in your opinion, after listening to this presentation, if you feel that the students that I talked about were impacted in their lives by being in student government. Did in fact their involvement in student government help them in their careers in the future? So I want you to be able to tell me if that's true, and if so, give me some examples. And the other question is, I'd like to know if you think, in your opinion, that being a member of the Student Government Association impact the history of Tennessee State University. Do you think that there were things that Student Government Association was involved in that had a very big impact on the history of Tennessee State University? So those are the two questions, and I want you to think about that because I want you to give me some examples if I happen to call on you at the end of this session. So this presentation, and I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to talk with you, and I wish all of you well during this COVID and during this year at Tennessee State University. And those seniors who are going out next year into the world, let's hope you'll be an open world so you can be on the stage and get your career choices and move forward. And for those who are going to still be here, let's hope that we can get together next year in this environment, and COVID will not be around to handicap that possibility. So my presentation tonight is going to be 25 years of student life and student leadership at Tennessee State University. So I'm going to bring you from 1965 to 1990. But you know, they say if you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it. And then you won't know it when you get it. So it's important to know from whence we've come, and particularly as it relates to student government. So 25 years of student life and student leadership at Tennessee State University, and I'll go into the next screen. I want to give you just a little history of how student affairs operated in 1960. Well, really 1956. I came to Tennessee State in 1956 as a freshman, and I graduated in 1960. So this was my president, Dr. Walter S. Davis. And Dr. Davis had been at the university for quite some time. And the next slide will show you what his philosophy was of student leadership. So we can go to the next slide. So President stated in his inaugural address a very specific commitment to improve the student activity program. And under his leadership, the student activity program was managed and made that contribute maximally to the education of students. So he actually believed that it was important that students came to TSU and they got an education in the classroom. But he understood that you spend more time out of the classroom than you do in the classroom. And as a result of that, the co-curricular activities had to be of such that it also be a learning experience for students. So he thought the student council should be elected by the student government, and they should serve as the voice of the Student Government Association. And that was the first president, to my understanding, who had that belief. And he thought that it was important to bring in outstanding talents for students to see so that they can aspire to be those people in the future. So I saw Marian Anderson. We had symphony orchestras on the campus. We had all of the people who were very specific. And you have to understand that in this environment, back in those years, we couldn't really go to other schools. We had to go to Black colleges because the other schools had not opened up for us. So choosing to go to Black college was not a real example. If you had to go, if you're going to college at all. So the brand of Tennessee State at that time was, and I want you to look at that theme very carefully. The theme says A1 first class in deluxe fashion. For just a moment, I want you to think about that. What does that mean? A1 first class in deluxe fashion. That means that you're on top. That was a brand. See, we didn't know about brands back in those days, but today we would consider that a brand. So that means when Wilma Rudolph left to go into Rome, she expected to bring back gold medals. When our football team went out to play, they expected to win. We expected to be A1 first class in deluxe fashion. So as I go through this, you'll see some of the students and how they accepted that brand and try to live up to that brand. So we move to the next slide. Now I want to just paint a scene for what was going on in 1960 and 1964. The desegregation of Nashville. When I came to Tennessee State in 1956, we could go to no movies downtown. We had one movie across the street from Fisk, and we had to go to that movie. We'd walk all the way down to Fisk to go to the movie. And you couldn't go out to eat any place. And we just were on the campus at TSU, and the girls couldn't ride in cars. So we had to create an environment at TSU that nurtured persons and gave them all of the skills and all of the entertainment. So we brought everything to the campus. Back in 1960, the Olympic accomplishments, that's a part of that A1 first class deluxe fashion. Not only did Wilma come back, but there was a team that she was on that also brought gold medals back. And then so did Ralph Boston. So we did outstanding things in the Olympics. Now, the president at that time said, when the faculty complained that he was spending too much money in athletics, he said, well, it's very impossible for me to have 50,000 people come to a chemistry experiment. So if the faculty is going to keep their jobs, I've got to get out and get students in here. And the only way to get students here is to have people around the world know that Tennessee State exists. So I have to have showpieces. I have to put people out there so everybody around the world. And we had people on that campus from every state back as early as 1956. So I'll run through these right quick. That year between 60 and 64, the students desegregated this by sitting in the lunch counters and marching downtown on many occasions in order to desegregate Nashville, and they were successful. We had Olympic accomplishments, you know about those. We won the national championship in football over Ford A&M University in the Orange Blossom Classic. We had basketball championships. In fact, the first time a Black basketball team was able to play in the NAIA, not the NCAA. They hadn't opened up then. They let the first Black group play in the NAIA. So our basketball team played in the NAIA. They won the national championship of the NAIA for 3 years in a row. So that's the start of that A1 first class in deluxe fashion. See, if you really believe that you can do this, it helps you really to accomplish this. It's a mindset, because then it makes you work harder. At the same time, the Pogues Players Guild was going out to military bases across the world, entertaining the troops. And we had band performance in the inaugural parade of President Kennedy and the NFL halftime. I think we were the first band to play in NFL halftime. So if you can see this, we were integrating the world, and we were participating, we being Tennessee State University, in these kind of activities, because we actually believe that we were A1 first class in deluxe fashion. So let's go to the next slide. Now, between 65 and 69, there was what came upon the campus was academic excellence. The president of Student Government Association, Dr. Levi Watkins now, but he was Levi Watkins Jr. in 65 and 66. He was president of Student Government Association. He was the first president of the Student Government Association that I worked with when I came back to TSU to work. And he felt that while Tennessee State was winning all these gold medals and nobody was saying anything about academic excellence. So he wanted the university to be known for its academic excellence. So as a result, he started off, and following him was Obie McKenzie, James Montgomery, and William Choctaw. And I'll talk with each one of those separate. But those were the ones who pushed for academic excellence, so our brand will match what we were doing in the band and on the football field and everywhere else. So let's talk about them one by one briefly. So let's move to Dr. Watkins, to Levi Watkins, screen. Okay, to your left is Levi Watkins as a student. Now, you know, we do have now the Dr. Levi Watkins Institute on campus, because he started in '65 with this academic excellence meet, and he lived it for the rest of his life. So as a student, he was Mr. Brains, and Dorothy Branberry next to him was Miss Brains. So those were the two with the highest GPAs when they graduated from Tennessee State. It was Dr. Watkins who thought that he could not be a doctor. He came to be a teacher. And as a result of that, during the summer, some of his advisors said, we're going to send you to California so that you can be in this workshop, and that will give you some idea as to whether you feel like you can compete in a different environment. So he went to UCLA during the summer and was an integrated group where he was able to work with some other students at that time, and he was convinced when he could return that he could be a physician. So at that point in time, he decided to go to Vanderbilt Medical School, and he ended up being the first African-American to enroll and to graduate from Vanderbilt. He left Vanderbilt and went to Johns Hopkins, and while there, he's the first one who put in the defibrillator in the heart. And what we don't always say is that was the beginning of the pacemaker. So anybody who knows anything about a pacemaker now, you can give him credit for being the one who really became the one to develop that. And then I think it's said that over 3 million people are still alive because they have had that kind of surgery to have a pacemaker put in or to have the defibrillator put in the heart. Now, Dr. Granberry went on to be an outstanding teacher and came back to TSU and was a head in the psychology department. So we can move on to the next screen. And I can show you how leadership developed back there. Now, we used to have and I'm sure you still have those, but this is Levi Watkins running for president of Student Government Association. So he's on the platform here making his speech, and these are the voting machines here that we voted on back in the day. And that's what we call a nomination convention. And it was always in Keene Hall, and you had it full, and all the fraternities and sororities had their candidates, and they were trying to compete against each other. And as a result, the winner, as you see here, was Watkins, and he was a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. Now, the gentleman right to the right, his head is cut off, was his roommate, and his name was Harold Ford. And he was one of the first African-Americans from Tennessee to be in Congress. So in that particular class, we had 4 mayors of cities to come out of that class. A.C. Warden in Memphis, the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi came out of that class. So they were all competing, trying to be number 1. So this is just an election activities at TSU and how it was done back in the 60s. So we'll move on to the next line. Now, all of you know about Alpha Kappa Mu Honor Society. So it was Levi and those SPO guys who said to the president that we want to have academic excellence. So they started with the Alpha Kappa Mu Honor Society. So here you see a picture. Here you see on the left a picture of, I'm sorry, let me cut this off. You see a picture on the left of Dr. Goa, who was president of Florida A&M University. And you see Dr. Watkins and another gentleman standing by Dr. Goa. This is the first group of students at TSU who were initiated into the fraternity, which is called, and in the middle you see, I want to call his name as well. This is the beginning of the honors program at TSU. So you see Dr. McDonald Williams, and Dr. Jamie Williams was also the head of the Department of Arts and Sciences. So this was academic excellence blooming on the campus with the Alpha Kappa Mu Honor Society, and then the introduction of students into really being in the honors program. So many of you are in the honors program now, but this is the beginning of the honors program. And this is the director and assistant director that you see in the middle of the screen. So we go to the next slide. And this is the Student Government Association in 1965. And you see how many females on there too, right? So now, I don't know how many you have, but it was unusual back in the day to have females, but we have 2 females on this Student Government Association. And this is the 1965 group. We move to the next one. All right, we left Obie McKenzie, we left Levi Watkins, and he went on to become an outstanding world-renowned surgeon. So here we come to Obie McKenzie. Obie McKenzie came to Tennessee State, and in 1966-67, he was president of Student Government Association. Now, during that particular time was the time that the Black Power movement came forward. And it did come to campus of Tennessee State University, and Obie McKenzie was the one who sponsored Stokely Carmichael on the campus. So the next slide will show you probably, okay, now this is Stokely Carmichael over here on the left, that's bending over. And many of you have heard about Stokely Carmichael and know about his place in the history of the civil rights movement. And this is the old Student Union building. It was always right behind the Greek Row, but they tore it down some years and built a new Student Union building. But this is the old Student Union building, right behind Greek Row. The cafeteria was there, the dancers were there, fraternity sorority officers were there. So that was the structure. So this is Stokely Carmichael talking to the students in front of Student Union building. So we go to the next slide. This is James Montgomery. And let me say that Obie McKenzie went on to Wall Street, and he's been on Wall Street for 30 years. And he finished Harvard University in business and went to Wall Street, and he is now on our board of trustees for Tennessee State University. He retired from director of BlackRock Investment Company, and he's back on Wall Street now doing some work. So I'm just showing you that I'm pointing out the student government leaders through the presidents, because there were quite a few leaders who came up with the same category. I can't talk about all of them, but I just take the presidents and talk about their history. So James Montgomery. James Montgomery was from Illinois, and James Montgomery came to Tennessee State University, and there were a lot of sit-ins, and then after the sit-ins was a lot of student unrest, only because people were concerned about how African Americans were being treated. We were not able to go to lunch counters to restaurants and eat, and then Stokely Carmichael came through with the Black Power movement, and it made everybody more aware that we should be treated differently. So let's go to the next page. This is a Student Government Association meeting. And this is James Montgomery, who's standing up. And there's one female on there, I believe, and you see what I'm saying. Most of the student leaders were male. So this is still academic excellence they're putting forward. And it was after this meeting right here that Martin Luther King was assassinated. When we came out of that meeting, we got the information when we were going across the street, and we used to meet over in Wilson Hall. You had to come back across the street to the rest of the campus. And that's when we heard that Martin Luther King had been assassinated. So at the bottom down here, these 3 fellas here beat Harvard University's debate team. And that's why they got the fists up, because they were winners of a debate between Harvard University and Tennessee State. Now, all 3 of those guys became lawyers. And Sampson went to Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh, and he's working in Illinois now. The one in the center is working in Atlanta, Georgia. And James Montgomery, who went to Harvard University, got a degree in business and law, and he went on to practice international law, and then came back to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And he's deceased now, because he became a minister and then trying to help some students and people in New York, I believe it was, met a tragic death. So let's go to the next slide. Now, this is how many of the students sat in front of Keene Hall. If you can kind of imagine that, Keene Hall is right in front of here, and there used to be a rock wall there. So after, and if you can imagine, when Martin Luther King was assassinated, people were sitting on that wall. Well, at that time, there was no interstate in Nashville. So all of the traffic going to the Ford Motor Company had to come down through the campus. So as a result of that, after students heard that Martin Luther King had been assassinated, they had some rocks and stuff, and they threw rocks at the police. And you'll probably see in a few stages down that there were some problems in terms of schools closing across the nation because of the dislike for the fact that Martin Luther King was assassinated. Tennessee State did not close. We did not have school, however, but nobody had to go home. Most of the other schools closed and left and went home. Students at TSU remained there, and we had to have all kinds of activities to keep people involved. It was James Montgomery who was just smart enough to work with the president to go to the governor to get the troops off the campus. So you may see another slide with that picture. So you go to the next slide, Dr. Morgan. Now, you see on that night, you see the cars are smashed. So those students who were sitting on the wall out there were very upset that Martin Luther King had been assassinated. So I told you there was some rocks and things. So they started throwing rocks at the cars. So they brought out the National Guard, and you see at the top, you see the tank up there. They brought several of those on the campus to make sure that law and order was, as they called it, was taken care of. Now, if you look over here on the left, you see that I think that was a vice mayor who was driving this car here, and I think he's the one who got hit. So after about 4 days of not being able to go off the campus because the National Guard had closed the campus down, it was James Montgomery and Dr. Davis who went to the governor. And as a result of that meeting, the governor called all the troops off the campus, and then things went back to normal, and people started coming back to colleges across the nation, and then the school systems went open, and people went back to regular life. But this is the reaction to the assassination of Martin Luther King's death at Tennessee State University, and what inspired and what happened. And you see the tanks coming down the street, and that was because students were very upset and they didn't want them to destroy any property. So they brought the tanks out to secure the campus, and nobody was hurt. In fact, we went over in front of Hankel Hall, and we had hot dogs and music every night to entertain the students, and we made it through that crisis. So let's go to the next stage. All right, this is the same thing as Coach Merritt that you probably heard of. That's why it's John Merritt Boulevard. And that was the vice president for business affairs. So that particular night, there was a fire in the ROTC building, and everybody was on the campus trying to see what was going on there. So I'm saying that in the middle of this, student leaders had a role to play because they were looking out for the campus. They were looking out for the student body, and they took on their responsibility with the president to go see the governor to make sure that all these troops left the campus. So we go to the next slide. Now, this is a new president, 1968, Dr. Andrew P. Torrance. And Dr. Torrance came in 68, and he started his career. He was a student at Tennessee State, and he came back to be president. So let's go to the next slide. All right, this is William Choctaw. Choctaw was an SGA president in 1968 and 69. And I want to tell you what they're doing now. Dr. Choctaw was from Nashville, and he got a law degree and a MD degree, both. And he lives now in California, and he has his own medical center. So these people that I'm talking about, you ought to Google them and see what they're doing now. This is William Choctaw, and he lives in Los Angeles, California. He was SGA president, and during that time, he was also a part of academic excellence in terms of making sure that the university was known for academic excellence as it was in football everywhere else. So we go to the next slide. All right, this is Ernest Gray, who was from Memphis, Tennessee. And Ernest Gray was an outstanding president of Student Government Association. And during his administration, we had this people going up and down the campus who were going to the Ford Motor Plant to work. So when the shifts changed, there was quite a few coming back and forth, and the traffic was very heavy. So one of the young ladies trying to get from one side of the campus to the other was hit by a car. So Ernest Gray, as president of Student Government Association, thought that the Student Government Association should respond to that. So the next slide will show you what the response was. Okay, if you see this phone here, this is Gray in the middle of the campus with a bullhorn, talking about that there needed to be something done about the street because students were having to pass from one side to the other, and it was dangerous. And as a result of that, one student had been hit by a car. And over here on the end, you see Gray, and this is the dean of students with the hat on, who's standing right next to the president of student government. So what I want you to know about that, at my time at TSU, there was not ever a student government fighting the administration. We were always together in terms of knowing that we could be stronger, as they say, together. So this young lady went to the hospital and she was okay, thank goodness. But as a result of this protest of students, let's take the next page. What do you see there? You see a bridge going over from one side of the campus to the other side of the campus. So that bridge was put there so students could go and walk across the campus as opposed to being down here where these trucks are going up under here. And that they stayed there until they put the administration building right in the middle of the street, which is where it is now. But prior to the administration building in the middle of the street, that bridge went from one side of the campus to the other side of the campus. So that was part of the fact that the students protested and was concerned about their safety, and the people in Nashville were concerned about their safety. So as a result, we got this bridge. Now, if you go on Vanderbilt's campus, they have the same thing now. They still have a bridge going close to the medical center. So when we got ready to renovate the campus and do a complete overhaul of the campus, they tore this bridge down and they put the administration building in the middle of Centennial Boulevard. So you still can't go straight up and down the street. And then of course, what also helped the fact that interstate came through down further and the traffic bypassed the campus. So I want you to remember now what we asked you in the beginning. Do you think that anything the students did impact the history of Tennessee State? And I want you to see what students are doing after they came out of Tennessee State in student leadership that make them stronger, to take on new ideas and be leaders in their community. That's what I want you to think about. So this is Ernest Gray. Now, Gray had to go to the Army because he was, back in those days, we were in the, I'm not sure which war was it, we were in, and of course, people had to go to service, and he died in service. He didn't die on the battlefield, but he died in another facility in Florida. So he was a very outstanding gentleman, and it was very much a loss for him. And we certainly hated that he had that opportunity to do so many things. And because of having to go to service, his life was interrupted and he couldn't go to college and whatever. So we lost him. Okay, William Martin was the next SGA president, and he's from Nashville, Tennessee. We can do the next slide. And he was a business major. You still see the Student Government Association getting together. Now we have the first female vice president of student government sitting with him. And during that time, they were very interested in helping to recruit more students, to get more things going on campus where students would enjoy, and they got more involved in student life. And Mr. Martin died this year from COVID. And we really hate that. And he was from Houston, Texas when he died. We take the next slide. Dr. Morgan, we move to the next slide. Now, here we go. Now, how many of you seen this gentleman? He's a teacher on campus. His name is Attorney Robert Smith, and he teaches in the School of Political Science. So this is his reign as president of Student Government Association. He was from Nashville, Tennessee. And during this period, we had the academic excellence. Everybody got onto that. Now we're going into the socialization. You'll see a little bit more people getting together and socializing and talking about how they can help them recruit more students to the campus. So Robert Smith went to Howard Law School and graduated. He came back to Nashville, started his own law firm, and he's also teaching on campus in political science. We can go to the next one. So in 1947, and this is way before what we're talking about, the University of Tennessee at Knoxville started a school, which is now considered our downtown campus. But they came to Nashville and set up a school, but was not supposed to give degrees. Their idea was that they were just going to have a school to help people who were working to get more education about the jobs they were doing. Well, then in 1971, they decided that they want to give degrees. So then they gave us a problem because you can't have two state schools in one city doing the same thing. So the question became, who's gonna be the one to exist? So you're talking about the University of Tennessee, downtown campus, what we have now was then University of Tennessee at Nashville. And Tennessee State only had the main campus. So there was a fight that went on for about 20 years. And if you notice, they said dismantle the dual system of higher education in Tennessee. So you had to make sure that you didn't have two schools in one state doing the same thing. And as I said again, who's going to win this battle? Is it going to be University of Tennessee, which means that you would now be at University of Tennessee, or was it going to be Tennessee State? And the Tennessee State would take over the downtown campus. So if you see on here, Georgette Peak in 1977, it's the last sheet on here, who was a federal judge, ruled that Tennessee State would be the remaining institution and the University of Tennessee would have to leave that facility. So we took over that facility in 1977. So that meant that the president of Tennessee State was the president of both places. It meant there was Tennessee State where we are on the main campus as well as the downtown campus. So that gave us two campuses, and University of Tennessee went back to Knoxville, which was where their base was. So then Tennessee State went on from that point in 1977. So let's go to the next slide. All right, as you would see, here are discussions going on about UT Nashville and Tennessee State University. Well, that was the beginning of the discussion about who was going to be the remaining institution. And if you see on the right, it says UT and growth plan assailed by TSU head. Well, that we were saying that we don't want the University of Tennessee in Nashville because that means that both of us can't exist. They are bigger than we are, so they could very easily become the university in Nashville. And as a result, then Tennessee State would not be a university anymore. We'd be a part of UT. So here are the papers, headlines in the paper who talked about that. So let's go to the next slide. All right, this is the student government president at Tennessee State University in 72. If you notice back in 71, that's when that article came out. So what did the students do? They started fighting for their university. So they started marching downtown to the state capitol. You see the sign that says one state university in Davidson County. So what I'm showing you is that students responded to that. And Ricky Pearson was president of Student Government Association. And Ricky Pearson went on to be Assistant Attorney General in Kentucky, and he finished Howard Law School. So the students took up the battle from there. And as you go through this, you'll see they march almost every year to keep it in front of the minds of the people in Nashville and the courts that Tennessee State wanted to maintain its campus, and it did not want to be taken over by the University of Tennessee. So let's move on to the next chart. Now this is Bernard Turner. And Bernard Turner went to Howard Law School as well and got his degree after finishing Tennessee State. So this particular year, students were still involved in student activities on campus, but they kept a very keen eye on what was going on with Tennessee State and UT because they wanted to make sure that Tennessee State remained Tennessee State from that time forward. So you see a little of the, in terms of the dress, you can kind of see how students dressed in one phase and how they went on to dress in another phase. So what you will see is how the society kind of changed and how students and what was going on in the society made them change that way. So let's move to the next slide. So this is Marcus Lucas, and this is his Student Government Association. And I think that you will be surprised maybe by the number of students who were so actively involved, and they really were dynamic in terms of coming to meetings and talking to things and working out problems and planning for student life and actually making things happen on campus. Marcus Lucas is now living in, I think it's about 30 miles from here south, where the Middle Tennessee State University is. And he is vice president of a trucking company. He was a business major. So he's very active in his community. And he served on the selection committee that chose the next president of Tennessee State University. And, you know, this young lady on the end over here, I just saw Annette McGee. She's a judge in Ohio. And as I looked around the sheet, I know about what a lot of them are doing now. So let's move on to the next slide. Now, this is President Frederick Humphries, who came in 1975, and it was Shirley Cunningham who served on as a student representative on the selection committee. So in every phase of the change of TSU and the life of TSU, students had a really a big part in that. So Dr. Humphries came in 1975. And let's go to the next slide. All right, you see we're still fighting. TSU plus UTN equals TSU. So you see what students were concerned about. They wanted to be sure that there was no indication that any other school would come and take our school. So there were marches and there were rallies and all to keep students and the community aware that we did not want to lose our heritage. We wanted to save TSU so you could come here in the future. And that was what they were walking and fighting for back there in 75 and 76. Now, Shirley Cunningham went on to law school at Kentucky State, and he lived in Frankfort, Kentucky. So let's move on to the next slide. I'm being conscious of your time, so I'm trying to move a little faster. So this is Kenneth Hawkins. If you see the twins over here on the car, only one, however, was president of student government, but we couldn't tell which one showed up because we didn't know one from the other. And both of them, of course, were outstanding students, and they kept up the whole idea of TSU. And you see all of the students who come out and participate with them. And this young lady standing here in the second picture went on to be a very good singer. And she was, I just happened to see a picture there. She was Miss Tennessee State University, and we had the big events in Keene Hall where and then he moved really to Gentry Center, where the queens would come in for their contests and show their talent and whatever. And she did something called Young, Gifted and Black, and she did a She sang, she played the piano, she danced, she did everything. So she won the contest for Miss TSU. So we go to the next slide. Now, this is Brian Williams, who's very active in the university now and very active in the Alumni Association. So Brian came to Tennessee State in 1977. And during those times, it was not quite as good as it is now. I mean, our campus didn't look like it does now, and we had heating problems. And 1 week, 2 weeks, I guess we didn't have any heat. So the president was working, Dr. Humphries, as I showed him, was working with the people downtown to get heat. We couldn't get the boiler fixed. It was just a big problem. So this young man said, well, Dr. Humphries, don't you worry about that. We'll take care of that. So he and the students marched on the state legislature. And you'll see in the next picture, you see the sign hot water tank. That's what they were looking and asking for. So on the next slide, you'll see the results of that. All right, here are the students sitting at the state legislature. Up at the top is Dr. Humphries telling them that I've asked you to do this and we haven't had a response. Then you see the people who are on the state legislature. And if you can see the gentleman at the bottom on the right, now that's Avon Williams. The campus downtown is named for him. And he was an attorney, a Black attorney in Nashville who always looked out for Tennessee State. And this is the director of the physical plan at that time. So they were making that spiel to say, look, we don't have a boiler. We've been asking for a boiler. We can't get a boiler. So then over here, you see Brian Williams standing up with paper in his hand, and he had a discourse to talk about in terms of why we should not be treated different from anybody else. And at the top page, you see the legislators sitting up here listening to Brian Alexander make that comment. So when they came out of there, they came out with a new boiler for the school. And then, of course, we went on as usual, but that was a major thing that happened with Brian time. So let's go to the next one. Got to smooth around. Now, Brian became a big lawyer, and he went on to be the assistant attorney general in the state of New York, and he's still practicing law in New York now. So this is the history of this merger I talked about earlier about UT and TSU. So this is a program where they really discussed what happened and from the time that UT came to Nashville and when Tennessee State took over the downtown campus of UT and became one. So they came back on the 100th anniversary of TSU to talk about that experience so they could document the history. So that's President Humphries on the end here. And you had all of the players on this stage who were talking about what happened during those years. And they did that to document the history because this is the first time in the history of America that a Black school took over a white school. So that's history. So they were documenting that history on that day. Let's move to the next one. Okay, this is Winfred Jenkins. If you see, we're still marching down here. And then that federal building up here, now these were years before they had made the decision. So this was 78, 79. So you see them out in front of the courthouse, all concerned about keeping the history of TSU for the future. So you all could be enjoying this time together. Let's move on to the next. This is Ron Lashley. Ron Lashley is from Alabama. And when the two schools came together, see, Tennessee State took over the downtown campus. So the students who were on the downtown campus then became students at Tennessee State. That means the administration had to be one, the student body had to be one. So when the student body came together, then you see the president of student government was Ron Lashley. The vice president was this young lady, I can't remember her name. And this was the representative of the downtown campus of UT who was still a student. He was elected vice president for student affairs, vice president of the Student Government Association too. So they put together the first merged institution. in the Student Government Association. If you look over here on the side, you have both African Americans and Caucasians who came together to form the first student government of the new era of Tennessee State University without the University of Tennessee being involved. So this gentleman here was a peacemaker. It was his job to keep everything going, and probably he did as well as anybody in the faculty because there was really no dissension. The students got along really well. So you see the president giving the oath of office to the vice president of the Student Government Association. So we move to the next slide. This is Roosevelt Ham. And of course, right after the merger of two, there were quite a few students who left the campus, students being Caucasian students. And that's when the Middle Tennessee State University's enrollment started increasing because a lot of students decided not to come to TSU, but to go to Middle Tennessee State. So the Student Government Association got with the president of the university, and they started going into cities to encourage more students to come to TSU. So that was really the beginning of the classic game, both in Atlanta and in Memphis. Those were like show places where we took the band and the football team and played ball and had all of the seniors come to the football games to encourage them to come to TSU. And it was all a recruiting event. So let's go to the next stage. Now this is Fred Jackson. Fred Jackson graduated and went on to be in the Secret Service. And we always thought this what he would do because he was such a dynamic person. And if you can picture this, we won the battle, right? But Fred thought we didn't win the war. So he always had his group of people making sure that Tennessee State did not have, and his student body didn't have any repercussions of the merger of the two schools. So this is a little session over here he's having with his student leaders on the side for some activity they're doing. And in the middle here, that's the president of the university and vice and the student government president in Miss Tennessee State. And they're all very happy because we are now the institution in Tennessee, Nashville, and the University of Tennessee is no longer in our presence. So then we got to go out and get students. So let's go to the next slide. All right, this is a student government president, Georgette Peak, over here on the left. She's the first female president of Student Government Association. And this is a game, and this is governor here of the state of Tennessee at that time. And this is her Student Government Association in front of us. So they actually, you see how they dress differently then? They decided that they were going out there and recruit students. So you see the change in dress? And then they started to be ambassadors for the university. Now it was during this time that Richard Dent was playing football. Brian Ransom, I see up here, was quarterback. They were on the same team. So these were the recruiters, the real students who went out and helped to bring more students to TSU. So let's take the next screen. All right, so we're still recruiting and we're trying to get students from both sides. This is Darren Bowen in 1983. Darren is an attorney in Chicago now, Darren Bowen. And you can look up some of these people on Google and see what they're doing. Let's go to the next slide. All right, this is Tony Spratland, who's now in Memphis, Tennessee. And that's him on the stump talking to many of his students about something that they're about getting ready to do. But the students really worked together during this stage, and they worked for the university, and they represented the campus. And you had a really good quality of life on campus. And we go to the next slide. Then we had Dr. Humphries left Tennessee State after, 10 years, and went to be president of Florida A&M University, which was his alma mater. So we had a gentleman who came named Dr. Roy Peterson to serve as interim president. So Dr. Peterson came in 1985. So let's look at the SGA president the next year. Okay, then this was a question that was posed to this Student Government Association. And sometimes, you know, you win the battle, but you don't win the war, and that's what you always have to think about. So if you look here, it says Miss Tennessee State University wins the public apology. Now, when we became the Tennessee State of the Tennessee and didn't have anybody else in Nashville competing on the state level, it was the president who came in, the interim president, who decided that no longer was Tennessee State a black school. So Miss Tennessee State couldn't be in the Ebony competition, or she couldn't be in the Ebony book, because Tennessee was no longer a black school. So obviously Miss Tennessee State was really hurt by that. So Carlton Petway, who was an attorney in Nashville, took her case, and he went to the president of the university and said if we didn't get a resolution, he was going to the courts. So the president of Tennessee State did apologize. So you see public apology, and took back the fact that we were no longer a black school and we can participate in it. Now that was very crucial, if you can understand that, because look, if at this point in time this had stood, then it would have been accepted that we were no longer HBCU and their ideas. Even though once you started as historic black school, you can't take your heritage back. But this was the first acknowledgement that the new person coming in was deciding that we were no longer black school and we couldn't get involved in black activities. So as a result, they apologized, and she really became Miss TSU and got an apology. So we go to the next.
$24 million. It's $24 million.
Can we go to the next slide? We're about to finish.
Just 1 million.
Man,
Everyone,
make
please.
sure y'all mute y'all mics.
Okay, we're about to finish. We got 3 more minutes and we're out. This is Miss Tennessee State, and this is a new interim president. Well, the students didn't like the president, right? Because they already decided that he wasn't for the students. So then the students decided to do a petition, and after the petition, then the chancellor agreed that this person would no longer be president. So then we had Dr. Otis Floyd come in as president. So this gentleman maybe stayed maybe a year, if a year, but it was because of the student complaint that they didn't feel that he worked in their best interest, so he was removed. So let's go to the next one. All right, this is Greg Carr. Now, Greg Carr is one of our most outstanding students. He went to Temple Law School and he went to Ohio State and got his PhD. And now he's over the Black Studies program at Howard University. And you really should Google him. So he came in as the president of student government in 1986. And he was one of the persons who really brought the power of the student together. And he was a very great voice, a very intelligent young man, did an excellent job, as all the other SGA presidents did. So let's move to the next screen. So this is Dr. Otis Floyd, and he was president in 1987 through 1990. And that's the Floyd Student Union building that you see there now. And that was named for him. And we're going to stop at this point. So I want you to see, what did some of these students do? Most of them went to law school. Some of them went in business. Some went in education, and they went in different fields. But what you find out that they were all successful, and they were just ones that were the president. It didn't mean that everybody else on the student government didn't do some of the same things they did. I couldn't talk about all of them, but I could talk about the one who was at the pinnacle, who was SGA president. So what I want you to think about, and I want some answers from you, is number one, do you think that these students who had a chance to be in the Student Government Association did anything while they were serving in the SGA to help them in their careers going forward? Did it give them more confidence? Did it help them to be able to strategize with other students? Did it help them to plan activities so that once they got out into the world, they'd have experience in doing this and they would become better leaders? Do you feel like that? So if so, raise your hand. Okay, so in your idea that the students did benefit from being in student government because they had a chance on the campus of Tennessee State to try out the whole idea of leadership. So when they got off the campus and got into their careers, they would be just as good as anybody else at the table and the leader in most cases. And the other question I asked you was, do you think that the history of Tennessee State was impacted by these students? Okay, just think about what we saw. You know, we go back to the bridge. Young lady gets hurt, then we get a bridge going across the campus. People were going to take our school and make it UT. You saw students marching and marching and marching. We didn't have any heat in the buildings for about 2 weeks. And student government went to downtown to the Capitol, the state legislature with the president, got heat. So what it shows you is that there's a role for the students to play. There's a role for the administration to play. But when they come together, it's a bigger role for everybody. And that's what I'm seeing at TSU now. I see that the student government and the student activity staff seems to be working together beautifully. And you can always make progress when this takes place. It's progress for the university and it's progress for the students because you're learning a lot as you be in Student Government Association, and you'll be able to use those things when you get out into the world. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight, and I hope that some of these screens gave you an idea of what it used to be back in the 60s, and this is 21 now. Can you see how many years ago that you've looked over the periods of what student government has been like? So now you're at the pedestal. You're the ones who have the story to write for Tennessee State University. And I'm really excited about what I see, and I wish all of you well, and it's been a joy to have a chance to talk with you. And I hope that someday in the future, I'll get a chance to see you personally. Thank you, Dr. Morgan, for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Merle. We appreciate you very much, very much. You're a treasure here at Tennessee State University. And on behalf of Freshman Innovation Council, I just wanted to once again tell you thank you for joining us on this evening. And I hope that this was beneficial specifically to our Freshman Innovation Council Cohort 3 as they will be moving forward, hopefully into leadership among the next 3 years of their tenure here at TSU. And so they can kind of see the foundation that was laid before them and the opportunities that were afforded to them currently today. So we thank you once again. And if we have any questions, we'll take a few questions before we end. If anyone has any, feel free to unmute yourself.
I have a question.
Yes.
I would just ask, what is some advice that you would just give for not only freshmen coming in to learn the leadership, but going out into the world and, seniors that's graduating, or we have a year to graduate. What's some advice that you would give us?
Well, first of all, go back to our motto at the university: enter to serve and enter to learn, go forth to serve. So while you've been at Tennessee State, you've had the opportunity to really learn your area that you've gotten involved in, whether it's whatever your major is. So what I would suggest that you do is to take all of that you have learned, experiences that you had on campus, which will obviously help you to feel more confident about your future. So when you step out into the world, you feel very comfortable that you can succeed. Because if you believe you can succeed, that's the first stage of success. So you take your education, you take your attitude about how you're going to present yourself to others, and you take over the world. That's what these people did here. And you know that from the different jobs I told you that they had. So what you experience in student leadership and working with others is sharing ideas, making you feel more comfortable about your ideas, and you being able to sit at a table with anybody who graduated from any school and talk about what you know and feel good about it. That's what I would recommend to you.
Thank you.
Hello, I also have a question.
Yes.
How did you stay motivated during different obstacles in your life? Like, what was your motivation?
My motivation was to be successful.
That's a good one.
that nobody was going to take my spirit. No obstacle was going to change my view of life. And you just saw that obstacle and you just keep on going. So you have to make up in your mind that nothing is going to keep you from reaching your goal. And you work at that every day.
I have
Thank
a
you.
question.
Question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll go. Was it ever discouraging or hard when trying to become a young student leader on campus when everything was going on?
Well, yes. You know, it's life, right? Everything is not going to be perfect. And I'm gonna give you an example. When I ran for Miss Tennessee State University in 1960, you know how many years ago that was? About 60 years ago. The people who put me up to run were members of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. I was from Mississippi, a small town in Mississippi. My opponent was from Memphis, Tennessee. So obviously she had more people to support her than I did. Well, then I had to decide if I'm going to be in this race, then I got to come up with an idea so that I can be seen and I can get some people to follow me. So in the parades that we used to have back in the day, I got the captain of the football team, the captain of the basketball team. I got all those big leaders who were seniors to come and get on my floats so that when the freshmen looked out there and they said, well, she's got all that support. She's got all of these people in positions that we look up to. So we're going to vote for her. So as a result, I won the race, right? I think they had a lot to do with them convincing, with freshmen just standing on the side trying to see what's going on, and they see where the leaders are going and the captain of the football team, so that kind of takes their impression in another way. Another example, the day that they were going to announce the winners, and Hankel Hall at that time was a residence hall for women. That's where I live. And then at the A building, which is, we call it the A building auditorium, which is right in the middle of the amphitheater, the big one with the cupola. On that steps of the cupola up there is where the president read out the names of the winners of the student election. So on that particular day, and people would be standing from the A building all the way over to Hanker Hall because they were very much involved in who's going to win. And at that time, everything was on the campus and you had much more people involved because you couldn't get off the campus. So when I got ready to walk over to stand out with the other people who were running, had to stand out with the president. Then he called the third person and the second person and then who won. So when I got ready to go, my sorority sisters were so sure that I had lost, they didn't walk over there with me. I had to walk over there by myself, right? That was a test of faith, right? So when I got over there and they named me as Miss Tennessee State, I looked out and I saw everybody running across the campus to say hello, and, you know, in red and white, right? So, which were my sorority colors. And I'm sure we got deltas in the room, but I'm just using this as an example. Sometimes you have to step out on your own, right? You have to figure out how best to maneuver circumstances. And then everybody's not going to always be with you, but that's why you are an individual, because you can make up your own mind and make your own decisions. Anybody else?
What event impacted you the most on campus?
Well, that's a good question. What event impacted me the most? I really think that there were so many events that I feel so comfortable with. It was obviously heartwarming when my classmates chose me to be Miss TSU, because I was underdog, right? I mean, I was from a small town, Mississippi, and coming to a larger place where there were many more students from Tennessee and all across the world, and I didn't think I could compete. But sometimes you have to put yourself out there and decide for yourself what you can do. Because if you think that and don't get in the race, then when you get out in the world, you won't get in the race. So you need to try your wings while you're at Tennessee State. So when I got elected Miss Tennessee State University, it was confirmation for me that I could do some of the things that I wanted to do, and I would have to sit and plan and work hard to make it happen.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I have a question.
Okay.
What made you want to run for Miss Tennessee State? Like, you know, instead of being SGA president or vice or any other position, what made you want that position?
Well, if you can imagine, things were a lot different then than they are now. It took many years before a woman ran for president student government, because that just wasn't a part of the environment then. You know, it was men do this and women do this. I mean, I became the first female vice president of a college in the state of Tennessee under the Board of Regents system, right? So that was unusual. All the men, I had to go sit at the table with all the men. I was the only one there. And of course, when they went out to do whatever they were going to do, I couldn't go because I had to be concerned about how I would be perceived by the community and the students and whatever. So it's kind of hard sometimes when you break the ceiling, as they say. So I wanted to be Miss TSU because, you know, I think you ought to want to be number one. You know, they told us that we could be anything that we wanted to be. So why not be Miss Tennessee State, right? So if the highest position on the campus was Miss Tennessee State, a woman could have, then go for it. So that was my idea. And that's what you can do and should do in life, because if you sit back and say, oh, I can't do that, then you won't be able to do that. But if you decide that you can accomplish things, you can set your goals and you go do them.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Sure.
Besides being Miss TSU, what other organization or leadership position that you were put in did benefit you the most and grow you as a person, as a whole?
Well, let's say when I got to TSU as a freshman, we had to take a test. You know, you all take the ACT now before you get to school. Well, we didn't do that. We had to get to school, and then they gave us a placement test. And the grade you made on that test would decide whether you be in the best first class, like the A class would be like the first class in English, the second class in English would be the people who made the next high score. And then, so you don't want to be in that fourth class. So you're struggling to make that test. But while sitting in that room looking, I was watching to see what other students were doing who were upperclassmen, because they were proctoring the tests and whatever. So I wanted to try to see who they were, because I was going to watch them on campus to see, you know, how did they get in that position? How come they were in there, you know, proctoring us? What did they do to get to that point? So I watched them, right? Then I ran for Miss Freshman. And then I didn't win Miss Freshman, but I did win Miss Junior. And then I decided that there was some advantage in being on a sorority, which I do really feel that it does help you get a network of people that you can work together and learn together and support each other. So as a result of that, I ran for Miss Junior. But all during the times, I was in different organizations. The Music Society, the choir, anything that they had, I thought I could participate in, I joined it, right? Because I wanted to be exposed to everything Tennessee State had to offer, because I thought that was for me in college. That's why I was there. I was there to learn as much as I could. So every opportunity that I had to be involved in something, I took that opportunity. And I think it makes you a better person, and you have such a great opportunity as students, because, you know, it's not always what you think. If you don't hear what somebody else thinks, that you don't know another opinion. You don't have to adopt their opinion, but at least it helps you to confirm what you believe. So when you get in organizations and you meet with people and they're different, then you understand why they're the way they are. When you get out in the world, you see them same people, and then you know how to deal with them. So the whole idea is exposing yourself to different opportunities so that you learn from those opportunities and you take those and make a better life for you once you get out. The one thing that I hate that we didn't do, and I hope that you will do more of that as students now. You know, everybody had a major and they were doing their thing, but we didn't stay connected after we got out of school. You know, if somebody was one of the best doctors in the world, for instance, when my husband got ill and he was given 3 months to live, who you think I called? Dr. Levi Watkins, right? Who came to Nashville and took my husband to the hospital to some friends that he had made with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. They took his case and my husband lived 8 years. So what I'm saying to you is, you're planning to be doctors, you're planning to be lawyers, try to keep contact with each other. You know, get you a base of people that you can be involved with. So once you get out there and something happens, you need an attorney, who's gonna talk to you better than your friend? Call your friend, an attorney friend on the phone. So I'm saying to you, what we didn't do, we didn't know how to do that. We didn't understand that. Now I do understand. The relationships you make in college can be life supporting relationships. So if you got a friend who's in law and you got another one's in medicine, look, you stay with them. Once you get out, you all communicate, because that makes you better. It makes your friends better. It gives us better support base to all of you. So if you can think about how you can continue to be a part of each other's life over the years, some kind of way, I think it would help you in the long run. We didn't have sense enough to do that, but you can do that, right? Because you're coming into a new world now. You know, the world is changing. You know, after George Floyd died in the street, things are changing. People who didn't realize how African Americans were being treated now kind of understand. And they're giving money to Black colleges. You know, you see more Blacks getting different kinds of jobs. MSNBC has a new person in charge. It's a Black woman. Walgreens has a new person in charge, a Black woman. So you see all of this kind of happening. You have to kind of stop and see what's happening. So why don't you be ready to be the next one to step up? Because you'll have a different opportunity than what I had.
Ms. Morrell, I have a question as well.
Sure.
If you had to go back and give yourself advice, like being that 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old on campus, what would you tell yourself?
If I had to go back to coming on campus for the first time, I would first say to myself, I would choose my associates carefully. And I would choose my friends even more carefully.
That's
because
true.
Sometimes you're judged by the people that you associate with, right? And you may not always want to be judged by them, so you have to be strong enough to make your decision as to how you want to perceive and what kind of group you want around you, or whether you want to be acquaintances and friends, you know, kind of friendly with everyone. But you have to choose very carefully the people that you're with.
Yeah. How effective and also how detrimental do you think your group of friends or associates can be to your journey of success?
Oh, I think it can make you or break you, right? And let me show you why. And it might not be anything that they have done necessarily wrong, because I'm not suggesting that we got all bad people around us. I'm not going to say that at all. But everybody kind of have their ideas about what's right and wrong. And you have yours, and when you come to university and you get involved with a group of people who may have ideas different from yours, then it's very easy for you to adopt the ideas of others. But it's very appropriate that you decide what you want to do, what group you want to be in, or whether you want to be friends to everybody and just kind of wait back and see which way people are going. Because, you know, if you have a certain standard and others may have a different standard, and you're going somewhere and it might not necessarily be something that's going to be helping you in your education, and you just might be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and you could destroy your life, right?
That's true.
So you do have to watch you know, and make wise decisions. And that is one of the most important things as college students have to do. And that is, you're there to study, you have a great opportunity. And of course, you don't just study, you got another life too. So you have to make wise decisions in that life and get involved in everything you can, because the college campus is a learning experience, kind of like a playground.
Yeah.
Learn everything, what to do on the playground. And you can make some mistakes on the playground, right? But you got to get them ready so that when you get out in the world, you have taken care of those things and you know how to do, right?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So making wise decisions, I think, is very important.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Good.
All right, well, Ms. Murrow, thank you once again on behalf of Freshman Innovation Council and the Office of Student Activities and Leadership, as well as the Division of Student Affairs, and on behalf of Reverend Frank Stevenson, we thank you very, very much.
I thank you for the opportunity. It's just exciting to have a chance to meet with these young people tonight. And appreciate the opportunity. See, it makes me feel young again. I can be 83 next week, and I can come and sit with you and talk about my past and know that you're going to do a whole lot more than I did, and that you can motivate you to get to the next step. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, and happy early birthday.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Happy birthday.
Happy early birthday.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Morgan. I enjoyed that.
You're welcome.
Okay.